What is up, everybody? Welcome back to my channel. And I know I'm not on my couch again. So I decided to do it kind of in front of my mirror area. And by the way, it's February. This is editing Sarah. It is no longer It is no longer February. It is March 6th. Just letting you guys know. Today's case is another true crime case. Another unsolved. The Jennings 8 is unsolved. It's been unsolved for a decade, but this has been unsolved for over 50 years. Today's case is the murders of Robert, his wife Helen, and their daughter Joy. They were murdered in 1966. So that's a long time ago. So on October 22nd, 1966, most of the population of Tallahassee, Florida was attending a football game at the North Florida Fair. So most of the population of this small community went to the football game, but Robert, his wife Helen, and their daughter Joy, who was 12 at the time, stayed at home. They decided they were going to watch the game on TV, and that's exactly what they did. So Robert and Helen had two other daughters. Norma Jeanette, which was their oldest, was 17 at the time of the murders, and then their middle daughter was 15, and her name was Judith. She was babysitting that night. So their oldest daughter was at the football game. She attended the game. Daughter Judith was not at home. She was out babysitting. So Norma was the one that returned home, and she expected to see her family like sitting in the living room, watching the game, but instead she found them nowhere. Normally, if this would happen, most people would look for their families, and that is exactly what Norma did. So when Norma walked into the house, the TV was still on, and her parents and sister were she couldn't find them. She did look for them, like I said, and found them in a bedroom. So her father was lying on a bed fighting for his life. He had been shot once in the head, and this made it clear that the attack had happened not too long before Norma came home. So keep in mind, when she found them, they were all basically hogtied with their hands and their feet tied together behind them. So Robert was laying on the bed. He had been shot in the head and was literally fighting for life. Like, he was hanging on, hoping somebody would find him and hoping somebody would help him. Norma's mother, Helen, was laying on the floor. She was also alive. She had been shot twice in the head and once in the leg. There were also some reports that Helen was stabbed. It was never confirmed if she was. Norma's youngest sister, Joy, was not alive. She had been shot in the head and stabbed more than 6 times in the stomach. I should have given a trigger warning at the beginning of this video. How Joy, which is the youngest daughter, was found, it suggests sexual assault. She was found with her underwear pulled down her thighs, and her cheek was bruised. So Norma's first call wasn't to the police. And I don't know if this was a normal thing if you found somebody dead that you called a funeral home. I don't know. But Norma called Beavis Funeral Home. And the first people to show up on the scene of her parents' and sister's murders, or attack of her parents and the murder of her sister, were Russell Beavis and his young son, Rocky. Not the cops. So in an attempt to save Robert and Helen's life, Russell tried to loosen their bindings. If you know anything about true crime, you know that immediately compromises the case. Like that, you can't touch evidence, and he was trying to get them out of the evidence. So when the first investigator who arrived on the scene, which was E.C. Cooper Donley, he remembered how horrific the scene was. Like, I believe, even reading it, I was like, oh my, I could not imagine being the first person. I couldn't imagine being Norma. She was the first one to see it. So Robert and Joy both passed away that day. Helen was rushed to the hospital, which, I mean, makes sense. And They tried everything they could, but she passed away 9 days after the attack. Considering that Helen was the only victim that survived 9 days, you would think, oh, she gave a detailed description of the murder. Nope. She'd been shot in the head, and she was basically comatose the entire time she was at the hospital. But after she died, detectives literally had nothing. They had no lead, they had no idea who could have done this to this family, this seemingly normal family. So they believed the killer to be someone that the family knew. There was no sign of a break-in. There was nothing taken from the house. Like, there were coffee cups that were half drunk, and the ashtray was full. Like, it hadn't been touched. So, a neighbor told police that they had heard screaming around 10:45 p.m. before Norma came home. You didn't think to call the police if you heard screaming, but okay. There was no DNA evidence to say who was there and who killed these people. None whatsoever. And it didn't help that the crime scene was compromised when Russell tried to break their bindings. So, much later, as of like now the 2000s, investigators took to the internet to share speculations of the case, what they thought could have happened. So a big speculation was that the killer or killers stayed back and cleaned the crime scene. Like, they believed that somebody stayed behind and cleaned the crime scene, make it look like nobody was there, make it look like it was somebody they knew. But this theory was like widely rejected by anybody, because at the time that these murders happened, 1996, Tallahassee left their doors unlocked. Like, it was just that kind of community where you felt safe, you felt like you didn't need to lock your doors, and you would let almost anybody in because you didn't assume them to be a mass murderer. Others believe that it was also like a premeditated murder thing. It makes sense because not almost the entire town of Tallahassee was at the football game, but the SIMS family. But you also don't know, I also don't believe that it was premeditated, because at any second the SIMS could have been like, oh, let's go to the football game. Like, they could have just got up and went. So I don't believe it was premeditated, just because of how quickly somebody can change their mind. I've done it, been like, I'm not gonna go to a football game. Oh, never mind, I'm gonna go. So after this family was murdered, Tallahassee completely changed how they were. Like I said before, they would just leave their doors unlocked. They would let anybody in because they didn't assume anybody to be a murderer. But they completely changed. This was a small community of less than 100,000 maybe, and everyone had a sense of fear. Everyone was like, oh, we're gonna be next, somebody's gonna kill us, or that, blah blah blah. So the case was still open. Time passed. Absolutely nothing was made. Like, there was no arrest made, there were no charges being pressed, there was no evidence, there was just nothing for the SIMS. So the people of Tallahassee were like, hey, do something to the governor at the time, which was Hayden Burns, and they were like pressuring him to take this to the Capitol. So, like I said, Tallahassee was never the same after the murders. They completely 180'd from what they were. They, for the first time in Tallahassee history, people were purchasing permits. I couldn't remember why, I don't know why I had so much trouble thinking of that. Permits to own guns. Like, this small town didn't own guns. Hardware stores ran out of locks and bolts and knives, and judo and martial arts classes became way popular. People were buying water guns and putting ammonia in them, and I mean, hey, if it works, it works. But they were trying their hardest to make sure that it didn't happen to them. Tallahassee, like I just said, bought guns, and they were buying literally anything that would keep them safe. And police patrols and police dogs and everything, they were just patrolling the neighborhood. And Halloween happened just a few days after the murders, and it was literally paused. Like, nobody went out trick-or-treating, nobody opened the door if somebody was trick-or-treating. Like, they just completely shut down. Like, Tallahassee was not the same after the SIMS murders. I completely understand. I'd be the same way. So a neighborhood mother recalled how traumatized her daughter was after the young daughter was killed, Joy. And her daughter insisted on her checking every room in the house of the day. I think I just do that naturally. I come home, and if I'm by myself, I naturally just look to see if anybody's here. But that's just because of what the world we live in today. But I couldn't imagine being the same age, like 12 years old, and that happening and being like traumatized by it. So houses on the street after the SIMS murders were so hard to sell because there was the fear that they would be murdered too. Weeks after the murders, with no clue as to who did it, this immediately made people start thinking of people who could have done it. Like, it's like gossip. It's like high school where you're like, oh my god, do you know who so-and-so did? Like, blah, 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 blah. And everybody pointed fingers to one man, C.A. Roberts. He was a well-liked pastor at the First Baptist Church, one of the city's oldest churches. Everybody pointed fingers at the most liked man in the community. Everybody's like, he did it. He did it. It was him. There was literally no reason to believe it was him because there was no evidence of who did it, who could have done it. Like, there was no evidence as to who was even at the house the night of the murders other than the SIMS. But the small community of Tallahassee made a story up. They said that C.A. Roberts was a womanizer, and they assumed he had an affair with Helen and killed her family in a fitful passion. I'm gonna say one thing. You're having an affair with a woman who is married. Why kill her entire family? Why kill her entire family and also kill her? It makes no sense because you want her for yourself. So why would you kill her as well? So the investigators took these accusations seriously, which makes sense because they had no leads whatsoever prior to this, and they observed C.A. Roberts and his parish for a long time. They kept an eye on him. They were like, dude, you ain't going nowhere. We are keeping an eye on you, and there was no evidence that he did it. And he had a solid alibi. He was the football team's chaplain, which means that he is the pastor that has to be there at the games to pray before the game and whatnot. He was seen on film the entire night. Like, football games are filmed so that the players can rewatch it and see what they did wrong and see what they can work on. And he was literally seen on film the entire game. Like, he had not left the sideline. Like, and there was possibly there were people saying that he was there. So in the light of the accusations against him, he had to quit being a pastor. Like, he couldn't. And years later, he passed away in an accident. So, pastor theory is now, nobody likes the idea of it. And basically the only way this case can be solved is with the technology we have today. DNA technology we have today, and the technology we use to solve cases today. So, Investigator Campbell, one of the officers on the scene, caused a sensation when he stated he knew who killed the SIMS. But he refused to give names, stating he cannot accuse somebody without proof. So his claims were pretty out there. Like, they were very wide. So 2 murders, a sex ring, and a necrophilia, are among what he claimed. Like, this man was like, I know who killed them. I'm not gonna say who, but like, I have an idea that like these murders, and then they were involved in a sex ring, and then necrophilia. I don't know why, but I find that so odd. So a local author, Henry Cabbage, who was working on recounting the murders, so like basically he was writing about the murders, found footage of police interrogating a woman whose boyfriend was a suspect in the case, and the woman denied that her boyfriend had anything to do with it. But she denied that her boyfriend had anything to do with these murders. Like, she was like, no, he couldn't. But she did say she remembered going to the Sims house the night they were murdered. You're not making a good case for yourself when you're like, oh, my boyfriend had nothing to do with it, but I remember going there that night. So that was the first couple that had some ties to the Sims the night they were murdered. Another couple came under, like, suspicion, and their names were Mary Charles LaJoy, I don't know if I'm saying her last name right, and Vernon Fox. Neighbors described Mary as obsessed with death and was often caught breaking into funeral homes. That's not odd. Mary's boyfriend Vernon was also a peeping Tom. And a week before the Sims murders, he was caught peeping on Joy. A week before they were murdered, he was caught. I don't know if he was caught by, like, a neighbor or if he was caught by Robert. But, like, it would make sense if he was caught by Robert and he decided to murder him, right? But I don't know. I genuinely don't know. These two would give statements to police that were conflicting, and they were changing their statements all the time. They did later get married and then divorced, and then Mary accused him of doing things she accused him of doing the murders. And he literally has to give interviews and interviews and interviews to clear his name. He's like, I didn't do it, I swear. Like, so it's 5 decades later, and this case is still unsolved. There is no evidence of who did it. There's no evidence of how, I mean, there is evidence how they did it, but, like, no evidence how they did it very much, and there's just no leads in the case. So the other two Sims daughters, Norma and Judith, have not spoken publicly about their family's murders and have remained under the radar since. Like, nobody knows where they're at. But yeah, that's the Sims case for you. It was a quick little one, and I really enjoyed reading about it because it's unsolved. It's over 5 decades old, so yeah. Hope you guys enjoyed this video, and please give a like, please subscribe, and remember, comment. You can always comment down below what you want to see next and ideas and whatnot. So yeah, see you guys later.